So last time, right, we introduced Lombroso, and so we'll continue Lombroso's story. So he has this idea, feels this indention of the skull. What does this tell me? He comes up with this idea. This indention, does this mean this skull dude, or the skull divot, equals like a lower animal? Like, is he more animal than like normal people? Because I don't feel as normal people. Does this mean that he's like not totally human, right? And so this sparks a further idea then, is like, this person was a known criminal, he'd been there, like, can I identify criminals like other defects, or with other defects, right? Can I do this? Is it possible, right? Because, he's in here, he's trying to find something. He goes off, he protests, he's like, hey, Italian government, I want to go into your prisons. I want to start measuring elbows and noses and eyes and nostril openings and hands and heels and all this kind of stuff. He comes up with this idea. He spends a lot of time on it. Comes up with this supposition, right, that some people are genetic throwbacks. In that they are atavistic. And they are, and these are people that I'm looking at in prison. These people are criminal, and I'm making judgments based on physical characteristics. Now, he's not saying that the physical characteristic that you have leads to your criminality. It is simply an indicator. So we'll make a special note here. So this is an indicator of criminality. And so if you can go through and you can document certain physical features, certain different issues like this, you can identify criminals, right? We can identify people who are born criminals. So we can find born criminals. And this is sort of revolutionary, right? Is like we have criminals living among us, right? Who we thought everyone was sort of like this, but these people are not. We can find them by looking at physical characteristics, right? So, for me, right, I have a bit of a Cro-Magnon ridge on my forehead. Apparently, that from an evolutionary standpoint, having a pronounced ridge is really good for like blocking out the sun in your eyes. So I have sun protection. It also happens to be a good place to rest my sunglasses on top of my head. So it's like double like eye protection, sun protection kind of stuff. So it's pretty sweet. Having said that, it means I kind of look like a huge caveman because I have a big forehead and a Cro-Magnon ridge. Under this concept, right, this might get flagged as possibly criminal. So, maybe that's kind of fine, right? Maybe we measure enough people, maybe we collect enough data, but, from Lombroso's standpoint, he spent years collecting data. He started going through, and it became sort of accepted. This was a person who would go out who would get called into criminal trials. They would look at people, and when it comes to sentencing or a jury selection or giving testimony, the court would be like, hey, what you think about this guy? Like, criminal or not? And Lombroso would be like, oh, no, this dude, born criminal. He will, kill again, right? Or he'll never reform. You gotta axe him. You gotta axe him. What's funny about that, though, is that he's making judgments on people based off physical characteristics. And the thing is, right, a lot of criminals in Italy at this time tended to be from Africa. And so, like, a lot of the descriptions used to be criminalizing people of darker complexion who were from Africa, who were either formerly enslaved or perhaps had lived there for some time. And so you start breeding the suspicion and fear of African American, or I guess they're not, I guess they're like African people because it's in Italy. I guess they're not African American, they're black, I guess is another way. And since they're not from the Caribbean, they're not Caribbean American. For this section, we're just gonna call them black because they wouldn't call them African American in Italy, or we'll call them Africans. African people because they have all these characteristics. And so this really breeds a sort of fear. It leads into governments about like, what do we call them? What do we do about these people? And so it was not unusual for, to advocate for imprisonment or separation, or to treat these people differently if they had certain characteristics. Now, some people would be more criminal than others, there might be reasons why, but I think he had something like there were like 5 indicators of someone who, was more likely to become criminal, right? You see, like the danger of this though is that if we start looking at people just off based off the way we look, and we see that, hey, that person might be criminal, creates kind of a problem, right? Is it right or is it fair to judge people just based off what they look like? I would submit no, right? Especially since it led to, a lot of different issues. Now, the thing is, like, this kind of attitude and policy was like looking for defective people led to widespread eugenics programs across the world because people were like, hey, we should, we got bad stock, we shouldn't have it, right? So, it led to things like eugenics, and, things like eugenics led to things like the Holocaust. I think we all know how that turned out, maybe not so good, right? And so, when you have things like the Holocaust happen, and we have this data, like this idea that you can identify possible criminals based on what they look like, it's not real good. It doesn't look real good. It doesn't seem to suggest that this is, a good policy or anything. And so it carries, biological theories, because everything's traced off of this, really carries a really sour, smell. People aren't too happy with it. They don't want to defend it. They don't want to enforce it. And so a lot of people are scared by it, right? So we'll talk a little bit about implications next. So until then, no cliffhanger, but we'll talk about implications here.